The man looked serious, exceptionally so, glaring right back at Hamilton. The energy flowing between them was immense, so intense that they could see sparks flying between them as the energies collided, bouncing off one another, green and gold in a display of light work that would astonish just about anyone, neither one giving a single inch. It was clear that whoever this individual was, they were on par with Hamilton. Seeing this display of demonic energy, a powerful fog began to emanate from Salus, filling the air around him, spreading out massively, encompassing the entire area before beginning to swirl back in, spreading out what felt like hundreds of feet, before colliding back in on itself, compressing down. And as it did, within the fog, Salus's shape stood there, now donning a long cloak. Phantom cloak of infinite dreams, Salus said. This long flowing white cloak now whipping in a non-existent breeze, completely contradicting the wind being put off by Hamilton and the man that was staring him down. Oh, don't forget, I'm no fool. I knew that when I came here I'd be dealing with the Siren King as well. So we came prepared, he said with a smile on his face, as he raised his hand and figures began to make their way out of the woods, one after another, dozens of them, all of them beginning to glow powerful auras, a rainbow of colors, and a wide variety of appearances, some looking nearly human, others looking monstrous, all donning armor and weaponry of countless different varieties, all seemingly ready for battle. At this point, we've warded the entire area surrounding your little barrier. We've sealed it so that there'll be no magical transition in or out. So, if you are thinking about portaling away, forget it. You're trapped here like rats. I've brought an assortment of warriors that'll make even the strongest of demons think twice. If you think you and the Siren King alone will be able to handle the lot of us, you're mistaken. These are high-level assets, comparable to mid and high-rank demons, the lot of them, all with hundreds of years of training and experience in combat and magic. This is not a battle you can win, the man said, glaring at Hamilton, a smile beginning to creep on his face. But I'm not an unreasonable man. We can find a peaceful way to resolve this, can't we? All you have to do is hand over the prince, wherever he is, and we'll let you and the Siren King go. There's no need to die for it. Just give us the boy and our business will be done. We'll go and you can be safe. I'm sure you would have faced a great deal of profit should you have returned him to his dear father and mother. But it seems the odds are ever against you. It's time to make a deal. Be smart. You are a high-class demon. You must see the reason in preserving your own life. Hamilton adjusted his glasses for just a moment, never taking his eyes off of the man in front of him. You're right. I do understand the logic in preserving one's own life. But one's own life is only equivalent to the value of that life. Should I do as you wish, hand you the prince, on a silver platter. All it would attest to is giving up all the value in my life, my existence, my honor, and therefore my soul would all be forfeit. So if you're asking me if I'll hand him over peacefully, the answer is no. If you wish to claim him, then it is by blood you will do so. And I assure you, the blood that is spilled will be yours. Even if every other person here survives the experience, I will assure beyond any reasonable doubt that you do not. The man with the glowing golden aura looked furious, beginning to break away from his calm smile, gritting his teeth a bit in anger. Why, you? Who do you think you are? I go through the trouble of offering you a reasonable deal, and here you just spit in my face. How insulting. You think I have such little faith in my abilities? You just got yourself into a conflict that you have no chance of winning. As he said the words, all of the other figures lining the edge of the woods began to step closer, at first slowly and then beginning to pick up pace, one after another. Growls, roars, and shouts echoed out from them as they began to rush towards the group. Hamilton and the individual emitting the gold aura separated rapidly, backing away from one another, both raising their hands in the direction of the other. As pulsations of energy flew out from them, an explosion erupted between the two. Just as that was happening, Silas's cloak began to whip. Out from its form, a billowing, rolling blanket of fog began to roll out, so thick you couldn't see an inch through it, and from it countless monstrosities began to emerge, of every kind and assortment that you could imagine, as if they were crawling right out of someone's nightmares, by the dozens. "Form a perimeter!" Sailor shouted as the entities marched out from his fog. Taleon, Rico, Fausta, Melody, Vera, all of the others gathered together in a circle, preparing themselves to fight, possibly their last fight. As Hamilton and the man he was facing down get their footing, sliding to a stop away from the explosion at the center, both auras beginning to flare again, getting ready to cast more spells. But before anything else happened, another massive explosion erupted in between Hamilton and the figure with the golden aura. Moathes, he called himself. The explosion erupted, shattering the ground in between them, sending rocks flying everywhere. The earth and stone around the location that it went off, hoisting themselves out of the ground in jagged form, in all directions. What in the world was that? Salus thought, staring at the impact of the explosion, and Hamilton wasn't far behind him. He's smart enough to know that wasn't a spell cast by his enemy. Where did it come from? What happened? And from the crater of that initial explosion came a gout of energy, so intense and so powerful that everything felt like it was tearing apart. The earth shook. Every stone found it impossible to keep its place. Everyone on the field was having trouble even standing on the ground. Red, blood red energy poured out of the central location of the crater. Energy so dense, so thick, you could barely breathe through it, seeming to expand out in all directions. Bolts of blood red lightning curling out of this location of the explosion that started it. Wind rushing out. Wind with such heat that most of the people around felt like their skin was on fire, some beginning to try to cover themselves, even small bits of cloth clothing catching flame. As with another explosion of force, an echoing pulse, the ground around the area erupted again, and from it, fire and molten rock flying everywhere. Stones big enough to crush a house, half melted, thrown hundreds of feet into the air. And from the crater, a figure, an absolutely massive figure of swirling red and black, magma seeming to drip from its pores, a long tail that stretched out 40 or 50 feet, massive claws digging into the earth and dirt, melting the stone into molten rock as it stood on it, waves of heat flowing from every inch of it, massive wings unfurling, wings that seemed to be made of pure fire, its black and red mixture of scales that covered it, from head to toe, shifting from one color to the next, glowing and radiating heat and demonic energy like nothing any of them had ever felt before, except for Hamilton and Salis, and on the exterior of its body, something of a skeleton, an extra skeleton outside of its body, wrapping around everything, like armor plates, all of them with porous holes that billowed black smoke, like stove vents, blowing it out. And within that skeleton, a long neck and massive head with horns protruding, curling backwards. It was some sort of dragon, an absolutely terrifying one. It looked nothing like anything Taleon had ever seen before. All of the dragons in his books looked nothing like that. It seemed way bigger, and that skeletal form on the outside, the shifting color of its scales, the feeling of heat. Everyone else seemed to feel like they were being burnt by it, but it didn't faze him at all. He could only stare at it in amazement as its head curled out, looking in the direction of all of the people who had been rushing towards the group. The group themselves looked petrified, looking at the whole thing in horror, thinking that this monstrosity was going to be gobbling them up at any moment. As its neck stretched out, reaching just a few short feet out from Moefest, it opened its mouth and let out an earth-shattering roar. Wind kicked out from it, rushing out in the direction his head was facing. Pieces of the ground lifting out, the trees in the distance beginning to smoke and catch fire, and the sound of the roar itself, so daunting, petrifying. You could feel it in your bones, like it was rattling the air. "It's not possible," Moefest said, trying to scramble to his feet as the roar subsided. "You shouldn't be able to be here. The gate was sealed. No one could pass through it." "How?" "Moefest, what do we do?" The men behind him started to shout, all of them looking in a sheer and utter panic. "Run! Run!" he shouted without any hesitation, beginning to bolt in the opposite direction. He had a look of sheer terror on his face, as if he had seen the most frightening thing he had ever experienced. He glared Hamilton down as if it was nothing, but this draconic entity seemed to scare the very life out of him. Even with all of the men with them, they all simply turned around, beginning to flee. dashing into the woods with great haste. As the last of them cleared their way into the woods, the gigantic draconic entity began to turn around, looking at the group, its massive jaws filled with jet black teeth, emanating a red light from the back of its mouth, billowing smoke with every breath, glowing red eyes peering out at them. And all of a sudden, Hamilton began to laugh. Oh, your timing! Oh, impeccable! I have to say, I've heard of legendary arrivals, but you, my friend, take the cake. I don't know how you do it. It's like your special gift. Every time, every single time, when everything seems to go to shit, you show up. Ah, it's good to see you, my friend. I bet those gooks weren't expecting the arrival of the Hellfire Dragon of Matara, the legend himself, Mesotora, as I live and breathe. As he said the words, there was a swirl of black smoke funneling downward towards the head of this massive entity, as the rest of its body seemed to fade away into this black smoke. A figure began to form in that black smoke, in a swirl of luminant red ashes, scattering away as the form took shape. A figure walked from it, a tall man with long red hair and red and gold armor plates covering his entire body, except it was all from pristine. The armor looked as if it had been through the ringer, parts of it heavily cracked or broken, torn away, burn marks, scorches, fractures everywhere. The man had blood running from his head and from segments of his armor, and as he took a few steps towards Hamilton, he began to collapse. Hamilton rushed forward, catching him just before he hit the ground. "What in the blazes?" he said as he cradled the man. "What happened to you?" "Mesotora!" he shouted, as the man didn't seem very responsive. In fact, he barely looked like he was hanging on at all, not even really able to stand. "That won't buy us much time. We have to go before they sense my condition. If they do, they'll be back, and I'm not going to be able to fight them. Putting on a good show was just about all I could manage," the man said, slinging his arm over Hamilton, trying to hold himself up. "Damn it, Mesotora. What happened to you? My son. Where is my son? Have you found him?" the man said, as Taleon finally figured out who this man was. It was his father, this broken and beaten man who arrived so dramatically on the scene, who terrified all of those soldiers with just his arrival. That was his father.